Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to continue with the Datamines, and we might as well just get straight into it. Basically, we have a bunch of British armor changes to start with. The first one is the AC Mark 1. Basically, the unusable hull MG was part of the damage model previously, which kind of usually indicates it works, but now they've just removed it, so it won't work. And basically, it isn't a weak spot anymore, which is kind of nice. The Achilles, the M10, but for the British, the premium one and the standard one, they've completely revamped kind of how a lot of its armor works. So, for example, a lot of the hull has been slightly changed, but the biggest change is the mantlet. The mantlet is going from 57mm to 63.5, so it'll be a little bit harder to get through that mantlet, but also it will be easier to get through the turret sides and rear, where they've reduced that by 6mm. The Challenger 1 Mark II has increased in weight. It is up 500 kilos, same with its full mass, and also its zoom has changed. So it used to be 7 times to 10 times, now it's 4 times to 11.52 times. This is the same change that they've done on all of the Challenger 1s, so the Mark II and the Mark III and also the Premium. So its optics got better. You know, usually for me, having a higher difference in zoom usually is better, because it means that if you're on the lower end, you have higher field of view, or if you're on the higher end, obviously you can zoom in a bit better, so that is good. Also, they changed the dozer and did the changes the same as all of the other ones. So, for example, made it faster to use, and also you can dig deeper now. So they're really trying to get people to use that stuff, and we'll have to see if it works. Then for the Challenger 2s, they also changed stuff. The 400mm CHA internal breach armor is now volumetric on all of the Challenger 2s. So we'll have to see what that means. Also, the Challenger 2s got heavier again, so they're really heavy now. The Dorchester 2E Challenger is 64,000 kilos, the 2F is 69,000 kilos, and the Black Knight is also 65,000 kilos at full mass. So all of these vehicles are very, very fat. They were fat before, now they are morbid. The TES itself also has been changed. They actually added a shell ejection animation to the coaxial 762, so that's kind of nice. Always lovely to see that going around. Also, the vertical limits for the Challenger 3 TD, they've changed it to on the rear corners, basically making it so you cannot shoot backwards at a 0 degrees. Instead of now it's a 0.5 degrees, so you can't shoot level with you, so your gun does have to increase. They also changed the Chieftain's armor too, and this one actually really worries me. The Commander's cupola has been completely changed on all of the Chieftains, by the way. So the Mark III, 5, and 10. Not the premium one, though, the Khalid, but all of the others. The Commander's cupola is going from 150mm to 40mm. So that basically means that you'll be able to get HE through it and overpressured. The Commander's hatch is also decreasing from 25 to 20, so you'll get mauled by AA. This is a problem that a lot of vehicles have. The M48s and the M60s, ones that I've been spading recently, have a real problem where people just spam the gunner optics and spam the commander optics with AA. It goes straight through, it kills the whole turret. It's incredibly annoying. So yeah, also their turret rotation speed got decreased from 22.5 to 20 degrees per second, and their elevation speed was increased. So we'll have to see how that affects the overall targeting speed. I've never really had an issue with the targeting speed with the Chieftain. That has always been something that, you know, it's more about positioning with it, but, you know, obviously changes are changes. Now on the turret left side also, the storage box does have a bit of armor too, so that'll stop certain HE and HESH stuff, things that don't really get fired too much. The Conqueror Mark II is also being changed. The turret rear is going to be 70mm now instead of 50, so a little bit harder to get through. The gunners and loaders hatches are now going to be rolled homogeneous armor instead of CHA, and also they added the shell ejection, which I showed in one of the videos, which is really cool. It actually pops out the side of the turret of the Conqueror, and it's just really, really nice. They also added 3 5mm spore shields to the Fox, so the Fox will be a little bit more tanky, but nothing really. Those things are really fun to play, even at the BR that they're at now. If you haven't played the Fox, highly, highly recommend it. It should be pretty fun. The Bishma, they also changed the coaxial 7.62mm. The tracer is now pink instead of red. And also, they added the laser beam riding sensor. So now you'll be able to see 80 gems coming at you through the LWS. And the same dozer blade changes that we've seen previously. The Vickers Mark 7 got a nerf to its optics, which kind of sucks, because the Mark 7 is actually really cool. It used to be 4 times to 12 times, and now it's 7 times to 10 times, which is quite a huge nerf actually, and that kind of sucks. The Warrior got massively changed with how all of its armor works. Basically, with the new Warrior coming in, they're also updating the other Warrior. So basically, they added a bunch of little armor pieces everywhere, and also changed the amount of ammo that each of the guns has. So the 30mm Raden, instead of 249 rounds, has 225. The full mass also increased once again, but the max speed has increased as well, and also the reverse speed, since it can go fast, it can go forward and backwards at the same rate. Also, the ZA35 IRST has been changed to the AA-EOT, which is just a copy-paste of the previous one, but it may indicate that they're going to change it in the future, which is kind of cool. Also, the Type 74 got the Chieftain treatment, meaning that it now has a steel storage box on the turret left side, which also has 5mm of armor, so technically a little bit better. And also they changed the PLZ-83-130, the big old, the Chinese event vehicle that they added, the big donker. They added the return rollers as 20mm of chassis armor. They also changed the physical tracks to the PTZ-89s, and the brake force is increased, so therefore you will stop quicker, which is kind of fun. The PGZ-04A, they added a little bit of armor around the headlights and the optics, but nothing too crazy. Same with the PGZ-09, and also the PLZ-83 got some changes to its armor, but once again, nothing that's going to affect anything. The T-3485 for China, the 1960s one, is getting quite a large buff though. The horsepower is going from 500 to 520, the max RPM is now going to be 2000 instead of 1800, and this means that it actually gains about 6 kilometers an hour on its max speed, and also its reverse speed increases by 1 kilometer an hour. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but for a vehicle that does need its mobility nowadays, because its gun is not as good as it used to, that's a huge buff, and should make it a lot more fun to play, especially with the M18 going up, and friends. The ZBD-86, which is just the BMP, got the BMP treatment we talked about last time. Apart from one difference, the turret rotation got massively buffed, so instead of it being 20 degrees, it's now 40 degrees per second, so that thing is going to fly around, which will be quite fun. The Arietes, they actually added spore liners to them, 20mm spore liners, so those are in the turret cheeks. We showed them in the video, but we didn't know how thick that they were, but yeah, they're 20mm there, so they should stop a lot of spore afterwards. We'll have to see if it actually makes a difference with those things. Usually you don't shoot Arietes there unless you have to, and it'll still go through, but it should just reduce the kind of fragmentation damage that comes on afterwards. The AS-42s, they have an external fuel tank over the rear now, and also the MGS, the Centauro, has a thermal-equipped scout drone, which it should have had for the longest time, but for some reason didn't. It had the other scout drone, which is kind of weird. The automatic now has a 5mm structural steel armor around the commander's optic, which shouldn't really change too much. And with the Hungarian lower tier vehicles, they mainly change their center of gravity, so that means that they'll bounce around a little bit differently. But for the Turan 3, they did actually add 15mm of track add-on armor to the hull upper front plate, meaning that it will have a little bit more armor to deal with, which will be quite nice. The AMX-30 Acra, they also gave this laser beam riding sensor that we talked about before, basically a way of being able to detect ATGMs, and the zoom on the optic has been increased. So before it was 6.83 to 8.01, now it's 6 times to 10 times, so a big buff for that thing. And since the Acra is not really a brawling vehicle, being able to hit stuff from range is going to be super useful. The AMX-30 AUF-1, so the howitzer, got access to some mudguards, giving it 10mm extra armor, which won't really do too much. And also the Foch has had its optics. I mean, it depends how you see it, right? So there's a lot of optical changes here. But the Foch one, before, it went from 1.88 to 3.53, which is not a great zoom. It's actually very small. But now it's a fixed 6 times optics. So you don't actually get zoom in or anything like that. But overall, it's increased over what it was before. So it really depends on how you see it. The commander view zoom as well has been massively increased from 10 times to 16 times. So you can technically use that if you want to. The AMX Surbrasse, they have increased its optics. So before it was a fixed 6 times, now it's a fixed 8.01 times. So that has improved that. And then also the AMX VCI, the grill on the superstructure is now 10mm instead of 20, which won't really make any difference. The funny thing about the Lorraine 40T is they removed 3 forward gears from it, so it will not have to chop and change as much going up the gears, and its max speed has gone down by like half a kilometer an hour, but its reverse speed has actually increased by 2 kilometers an hour, which is quite nice. The Mephisto and Santal, or specifically the Mephisto, I should say, is lighter now and has much more horsepower. So these vehicles should motor around a little bit better. Even though they have a decreased max speed, they should be better at accelerating, which should be quite nice. The CV90-105, the XC8, the premium one, which actually replaced the other 105, the zoom has been changed. It's been neutered. So instead of 8.81 to 10, it's now 2 to 8.01. So not as good as before, but you still have the good thermal, so it should be fine. And also got that laser beam riding sensor change we talked about previously. The ITOs, they have 5mm of extra armor, which will make no difference. And the VDAR, the vertical limits of it, basically the gun depression has been lowered. So instead of -4, which is what it has been since release, it is now going to be -2.5, which may not seem like a huge difference, because usually you engage stuff at distances with the VDAR, but at the same time it means that a lot of angles you could use previously you won't be able to use now. So that is quite a heavy nerf on it, even though it may seem like quite a small one. The M113A2, which is the ASRAD, they added some armor to the gunner optic and also the laser beam riding sensor once again, which is kind of cool. The PBV301, which is the Swedish BMP without the ATGM, that one can now be overpressured. It couldn't be overpressured before, which is why when I spaded it, it seemed kind of ridiculous that it wouldn't die to things that, you know, other vehicles could die to. I'm just going to check. Actually, no, sorry. The PBV301 is not the BMP, my bad. The PBV30... no, it's not even the 302. Is it the 501? Sorry, my bad. I apologize. The 301 is the little APC that Sweden has at very low BR. The 1960 ones, which was technically the first IFV with the 20mm or whatever it is on the top of it, it can now be overpressured. So before it couldn't, but now it can. And the PBV 302 and also the STRF 9040A with the RBS 56, so basically the bill launchers, they've added a 0.9375 degrees static elevation, which means that you won't be able to fire straight anymore. That kind of sucks. The missile itself does go above the target, so it's not a huge issue, but it's just one of those which is kind of annoying, and I wish it wouldn't be like that. The PBV 501, they have added the reverse gears to it, and also the forward gears, but they've decreased its maximum speed, and also its reverse. The 501, I believe, is the BMP. I'm second guessing myself now. Yes, it is. It's the BMP. My bad about all of that. So the other one, the Tiger II Sui, The turret sides and rear have been decreased in armor, so instead of 82, it's 80 millimeters. Not really going to make much difference, let's be honest. And also the Magak 6 Resh, which is the Hydra. The roof MGs can now be fired independently of each other, which is good, because one of the problems that the Hydra has, and I know this sounds really picky and annoying, but it's one of those things which is like something I noticed while playing it, is when your commander got knocked out, or when your gunner got knocked out, you weren't able to use any of your top mounted machine guns, which doesn't really make a lot of sense since they're designed for different people. They're designed for, you know, the commander to use it, or they're designed for the loader or the gunner to use it. So it was just one of those things which was really annoying, especially when dealing with a lot of helicopters, and also just trying to mark targets with that thing if your main gun or your rockets were taken out. So it's nice to see that it now has the same thing that everything else does. Took a while, but it's there. The Makava Mark III Bet, the zoom on the optic changed from the minor 6 times to 5, so not really a huge difference. The 12 times maximum still hasn't changed, so that's fine. And the commander view has been nerfed, but it would be interesting to see how many people actually use the commander view. That's one of those things, you know, I'm kind of interested to see. And then also the Makava Mark III Dor Delet Baz Kazag, which is of course the Ram Segal. The armor around the commander optic is now 25mm arrow chain, so 6mm structural steel. So you won't be able to as easily overpressure it, which is quite nice. You'll still be able to. You'll still be able to hammer things in, but I think that's a positive change. I'm really sick of just getting bonked, not by like Soviet HE. That stuff is fine. I don't mind actually getting killed by Soviet HE. What I can't stand is the fact that there are so many AAs right now where they just blitz around a corner, fire randomly at your turret, and then you just die to those rounds, which one of them just by accident basically, or through RNG, just gets through these little optics which are on the vehicle. It is very annoying, and I wish it wasn't the case. The Ram Segal also gets the same zoom changes as the Bet, so basically not huge changes, maybe even slight buffs to the gunner. One of the things they're doing with a lot of guns is they're changing their fire chance multiplier. Some of them are being removed, some of them are being decreased, some of them are being increased. So once again, just like naval, it looks like they are really screwing with a lot of setting fires on things. So there'll be a ton of guns which will have more chance of creating fires, and there'll be a bunch of guns which will have less chance. And there is a ton of them which have been changed. Just to give you an idea of like the changes, by the way. So stuff like the 20mm H03, and also the Type 97, so basically the Japanese guns. The FI round, the fire chance multiplier has been changed from 3 to 3.1. So if you want to have a look through them, you can do, but it isn't really going to make too much of a difference. Stuff like the 20mm M39 and then all of its subsidiaries, so the A1 and the A2, that the speeds of the rounds getting changed is much more of a change. So for example, the API, APIT, and Hefi, all of them have gone up to 1,030 meters per second, which is a pretty decent increase, so it should be a little bit easier to use those things. And also some rounds have been changed, such as the 20mm Type 99 Mark II, which instead of API is now APHE, so stuff like that will make a difference. But as I said, a lot of these are just slight changes with how much fire you are going to cause. A lot of higher tier weaponry is actually getting massively nerfed in how many fires it creates, but I mean, as I've said previously, like it doesn't really matter too much, because once you smash a jet, usually it loses so much flight performance, it's pretty much done. There is a few which is increasing though, such as the 37mm Model 37-1 on the N37D and also the NS 37, so they might be using it as a kind of balance mechanic thing which is going around. Because right now, as I said, like it just seems kind of random. The ones which are getting increased and the ones which are getting decreased. So we'll just have to see what happens. The ground weapon changes make a little bit more sense when it comes to everything that's going on. They obviously added the PMC 308 ahead round, which is for the Chinese, and also the 30mm MK30-2 ABM, which I believe is the Puma round. They have been screwing with it, basically decreasing its range, but also time fuse distance error was decreased, the shrapnel count was increased, and the penetration was decreased. So this is why it started working, basically, around the place. Also, the 40mm Akana M70B HEVT, the range was increased, but the proximity fuse arming distance was also decreased. So that should make it a little bit more useful. The 47mm, the 4732 Mod 35 for the Italians, and also the Mod 39 got nerfed again. This round is so bad, and it's losing more penetration. The APHE is down to 49.98mm, and the APBC is down to 48.33mm. So yeah, it's definitely not in a great place. The APBC, which is the round you actually use on the Ansaldo gun as well, for the early tier Italians, is also getting nerfed. So 62.60mm on that gun. I really struggle with that gun. I'm sure some people make it work, but I'm not one of them. The 75mm for the Germans, the lower tier ones, so stuff like the KWK-44, for example, the penetration on the heat is changing to 115 instead of 100, so there might actually be a reason to use it over some of the other rounds which exist, so that's kind of nice to see. And they're changing the 90mm D915, which I believe is the French 90, but I might be wrong about that one. Basically, the Heat FS, the round is getting halved in its mass, which is a huge deal, but its penetration has increased to 350, and its speed has slightly increased too. And this is the same for the 90mm D921 GT2 as well, so they're doing the same thing. The fact that the mass is being halved on the round is a huge deal. Same with the CN90 F2 as well. That one is getting the same treatment, so yeah, it's really should affect how much damage that does, with the fact that the mass is going from 8.95 to 3.65. Like, that's kind of crazy. The 90mm CN9052 F3 and F4, the heat FS on those is also increasing to 350, so all of them are basically getting an increase in penetration, but decrease in weight. The 130mm PL59A, which is on the PLZ, this set of weaponry, the explosive mass is increasing once again, and the penetration on the HE, so it's going to 36.85mm, so only a small increase in penetration, but for explosive mass, it's increased by, 0.3, which is quite big. The HEVTF gets the same treatment, so that should be quite nice too. The 152mm PL66, they added the BEE7HE, which actually is going to be replacing the HEVTF that vehicle has. It has more explosive mass by about 1 kilo, and also has more penetration, so basically up by 12mm. So that should be kind of interesting to see. So we'll have to see what goes on with that. The 9M123, the 123F, and also the Type 79 ASM, QN201, RB56B, and TOTA B80 gems. The guidance code updated to newer LOS autopilot format introduced almost a year ago, so they've finally got those things up to standard after a long time of being sat, not really doing too much. For naval weapon changes, the V601 SAM, so this is the one on the Bravey. They actually added an animation for the Bravey, which is kind of cool. Basically, the fuse trigger radius is now 35mm instead of 40, so you have to get slightly closer to the enemy, but also that missile just donks whatever it gets close to, so as long as you can guide it in with the radar, it should be completely fine. There was a ton of missile changes as well, which shouldn't really be a surprise. The AGM-65s, all the Mavericks, their ATGM has been changed to Heavy Heat Warhead, which is something we talked about previously. this new kind of set of rules, which should mean that these larger air-to-ground missiles do more damage. The AIM-7M, the gimbal limit, is now 60 degrees instead of 55, so a slight buff on that. And also the AIM-9Bs, the proximity fuse was changed, so the delay on it is now 2.2 seconds instead of 0.5, which is quite a big nerf, but also the trigger radius is nearly doubled. So instead of 5 meters, it's 9.144. So if it's able to do damage from that distance, this could actually be a hidden nerf for the AIM-9B, so that will make it a little bit better. They also added in some of the stuff for the AIM-120 and also for the active radar homing missiles. Stuff like this, I'm not going to cover those until they're finished, alright? Because when it comes to new missiles specifically, or new mechanics, one of the things that happens constantly is they get changed like 5 or 6 or 10 different times, and going through all of their ideas and you know, what they start off with is not really worth it to me, because of the fact that they change it so much. For example, on the first dev server, the Derby had not even its own model. It was the AIM-120B, so it wasn't really worth having a look at, and many of them were just kind of copy-pasted, so it didn't really matter. So I'm going to leave those to the side until they're actually launched, and then we can chat about them, because I just don't want to get not necessarily stuff wrong, because it's technically right, but just give information that is going to change within a day or two, because that's something that happens so much with War Thunder and these dev servers, and it means that people get the wrong idea, and it's just not good. The Fire Flash got changed massively, though. They reduced it in size with its diameter and length, therefore its drag coefficient went down, its wing area multiplier went up, and the distance from CM to stab increased twofold, so from 0.1 to 0.2. The mass at the end of the booster burn is now 120 instead of 80. The booster force has gone from 28,000 to 42,000 newtons, and the max speed is now 1,500 instead of 1,000 meters per second, and the max G-load is now 10 instead of 6. So the guidance code updated to the new LOS autopilot, which should be interesting. Same with the KH-66, but that's a pretty big buff for the Fire Flash, so we'll have to see how that goes. The Fire Flash is one of those weird and wonky IR missiles that I like to use. And also, they buffed the Javelin, meaning that you can bring along the guns and the missiles again. So you can have the 4 guns and the 4 missiles. So isn't that lovely? The Key 14T8 missile got changed to the heavy heat warhead as well. And also the PL7, the Magic 1 and 2, the guidance delay is now 0.25 instead of 0.3. So another buff to those missiles. The Magics have got, I don't know how many buffs over the last period of time, but it's just been an insane amount. They're really, really good now. Fantastic to use. They were really good to use before, and now they're just insane. Also, they added all of the stuff about the PL-12 and the R-77 as well, and the R-3S also, the proximity fuse trigger radius, instead of 5 meters, is 9 meters now. So they basically gave it the same treatment as the AIM-9B, and since they are kind of equivalent missiles, at least in the game, that kind of makes sense. There was also some new features which were added, so the avionics animation in the cockpit, but that was locked to the devs. We'll have to see what that actually means, because there's a lot of animations in the cockpit already, so maybe this is something which is more model stuff. They also enable gun muzzle marks. Now, obviously, people have chatted about this because one of the big things in World of Tanks is kind of getting your marks for your vehicle, meaning that you play it enough, you get into the top percentage of players of the vehicle, and that means that you get specific marks on it. And this is something that people work towards as kind of an additional thing on top of like spading the vehicle. So very similar to how acing crew kind of works in War Thunder. Apart from acing crew is just more of a time thing instead of an experience thing, or you know, how well you do thing, where gun marks would be something like that. But I don't think it's referring to this. I honestly think it's referring to, you know, after you shoot the gun a bunch of times, there's probably going to be like some soot or something that kind of sits on the barrel. Kind of like when you fire the AA guns now, they turn red, and red hot, or the machine guns and stuff. I'm pretty sure they're just probably thinking about something like that with ground vehicles, and that would be kind of cool. They also added values for research efficiency in the files, but there wasn't any changes, so they just kind of added it there. And the UAV minimap is now available to everyone, which is really cool. We talked about this before, where with scout planes and also recon drones, when you switch to them, you can still see the minimap in the bottom corner or wherever you have it on the screen, and that's awesome. There was some tech tree changes too, mainly for, you know, for the new vehicles that came in. So for example, for rank 6 ships for Britain, you now have to research 6 instead of 5 ships, and for Japan rank 5, you have to research 5 instead of 4, and for France, you know, planes in rank 6, it's 5 now instead of 4, and 3 in ships, it's 6 instead of 5, basically because of the new vehicles that they added, right? So nothing too crazy in that setup. And also they showed the Baden to everybody, and they moved the PR 12412, which is now located after the PR 161 1944 instead of the 206M. That's probably the biggest change to it, which is kind of nuts. They also increased the maximum BR to 13.0. That's pretty cool, and obviously pretty much all of the active radar homing missile vehicles went up to 13.0. There's a few which didn't, such as the is it the J8B, I think it is, for China, the one which has the PL 12s, which aren't as good as others, but also I think it only gets access to 2 of them, but most of them went up to 13. Like all the new vehicles and the ones that got actives went up in BR. Also, the F4Cs and the F4Es or the EJ and the EJ Kai, I should say. The first fuselage fuel tank is no longer marked as self-sealing. So once it gets hit, it'll just leak all over the place. They changed the F104J's engine as well to the Ishikawa Harima J79 IHI 11, which I'm pretty sure is just a license-built version of the standard one. And then the engine mass of the Tiger helicopters has been increased by 10 kilos, so they'll be a bit more chunky. The STKFC 141, they increased the turret armor. God save all of the newbies who will be playing at low tiers. Stuff like that is always terrifying, because that vehicle is a noob stomper, and it's very, very good at it. The 2A7V, they did change the hull armor. They slightly increased it, but nothing too crazy. Nothing that really kind of writes home about, or, you know, you have to get worried about. Only like 5mm here or 5mm there. And the STKFC 222, they increased the turret armor on that, and also the 2341 got increased turret armor too. They also added a bunch of economy changes into the game, basically because of the modifications that they moved around, mainly the EFS stuff that we talked about previously. This is pretty standard, right? Like when it comes to all of these setups, when you change the modifications, it changed the coefficients between each of the modifications, and also the minimum and maximum repair cost. Also, the A6E tram, the modification changes on that, even though it's a premium, you know, there is a bit moved around. The AIM-9G is now at rank 2, Mark 83 or MK83 is at 3, and then the AGM-123 Skipper is at rank 4. It doesn't make a difference, as I said, because it's a premium, but it's something to think about. Then also there's a bunch of the Japanese economy changes, because they changed, of course, the FS, so enjoy respecting all of those. And then also the A20s got moved around as well. So there's a bunch of zeros, for example, which are around, and a bunch of other vehicles which got additions of modifications. So just to give you an example, right, the AVA B+, which is in Italy right now, it got access to the AIM-128 as a Tier 4 modification, and the AGM-65G as a Tier 4 modification. What this does is it changes all of the costs of the other rank 4 modifications, because they want to kind of keep it to the same total. So for example, the engine RP cost, instead of being 26,000, is now 17,000. The FS is now 17,002, and so on and so forth. It also means that they changed the G cost of stuff around the place. A lot of them actually got increases, which means that it will cost more to actually purchase the vehicle right out, but it'll be easier to grind. So that's pretty much what's going on. The same with stuff like the B18A and Sea Fury and B6. They've just done a ton of them, and it's not really that worth going over. Basically, all of them are either EFS changes or slight weaponry changes, which change all of the different economical variables around the way that modifications work for that vehicle. But the main ones that are affected are, of course, some high-tier vehicles that we've talked about previously, the Japanese air tree with a lot of EFSs, and a few American and also British vehicles that have been affected too. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.